It's no secret at all that there was a lot of cut content from the Revenge of the Sith film. One of the most notorious is the cut sequence from Palpatine and his duel with the 4 Jedi Masters. But another duel that also got the short end of the stick, as impressive as it was Anakin and Obi-Wan's duel with Dooku on the Invisible Hand. It could have been so much more. But luckily for us, almost everything that was left out of the filming was included in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Sometime back we talked about one scene from the film that was done way better in the book, and in today's Holocron, we return yet again to the pages of the novel in order to compare the scenes. This time, however, it's not about dialogue or emotion, but about a fight. Typically, lightsaber duels are visual spectacles that must be seen to be experienced, but we firmly believe that it was the novel that did the most justice to the final confrontation between Anakin Skywalker and Darth Tyranus. The exploration of this is much deeper than it is in the book, and much more happens right here in the archives that we won't want you to miss out. Infinite knowledge awaits you, so crush that subscribe button and become an acolyte today. Now, my friend, let's begin. The best part about the films is getting to experience Star Wars the way that it was meant to be experienced, through dazzling sights and sounds that carry you to a galaxy far away. But the best part about the novels is getting to look inside the minds of these characters. Their thoughts and perspectives often reveal hidden information, and the duel at the beginning of the story is so very different. What isn't seen on film is just how many layers there are to this fight. The novel tells us the whole fight from Dooku's perspective, and all of the horrifying discoveries that he makes during it. It begins with Anakin and Obi-Wan expertly fooling the Count through body language, and it ends with the Sith Lord seeing just how far Anakin has come, enough to surpass even a Dark Lord of the Sith. One thing that is worth noting before we get into this, however, is that the novel was written roughly the same year as the movie, which is 2005. This means that the writer, Matthew Stover, was working off of the continuity that only existed in the films and the 2003 Clone Wars animated series. The reason that we bring this up is because there is a lot of insinuation that Dooku hasn't fought either of these Jedi since Geonosis, but of course we know that from the 2008 series that they have met a couple times since then in canon. But for the purposes of this video, we will be keeping closely to what the novel reveals to us, exploring what Legends continuity looked like around this time. Anyway, the scene is constructed as Dooku and Palpatine finish up a conversation. Sidious explains that he wants Dooku to kill Obi-Wan and to bring Anakin to the dark side. But then, Dooku is told that he must allow himself to lose and be captured by Skywalker. Palpatine would later give him a pardon as the Chancellor, but before all of this, Dooku does attempt to bargain for Obi-Wan's life, not wishing to kill him as his metaphorical grandson. But Palpatine is having none of this. Sidious knows that Obi-Wan is one of the last things anchoring Anakin to the Jedi way, and removing him from the picture was paramount. Eventually Dooku concedes, though his pride is displeased at having to surrender to the boy that he considers unworthy to even be called a Jedi in Anakin. However, the novel describes that Dooku is tired of the war at this point, having to orchestrate all of these schemes. The book even says is that he is feeling every hour of his 83 years, and that he's ready to end this silly charade. Finally, they sense that the 2 Jedi are on their way, and Dooku goes to take position, ready to give Anakin his sham victory. However, the Count is not ready for what is about to truly take place. Once the Jedi arrive and check in on the Chancellor, Dooku makes his grand entrance, flanked by 2 B-2 super battle droids. It is here where the Sith Lord sinks deeply into the dark side, perceiving the world around him differently. And this is where we get a look into the book of what it's like with Dooku and how he sees everyone in the realm of the Force. Kenobi was luminous, a transparent being, a window onto a sunlit meadow of the Force. Skywalker was a storm cloud, flickering with dangerous lightning, building the rotation that threatens to turn into a tornado. And then there was Palpatine, of course. He was beyond power. He showed nothing of what may be within him, though seen with the eyes of the dark side itself. Palpatine was an event horizon. Beneath his entirely ordinary surface was absolute perfect nothingness. Darkness beyond darkness. A black hole in the Force. And he played his helpless hostage role perfectly. There's an extended scene of dialogue between the 3 of them as they verbally fence about the state of the war, and Dooku takes the opportunity to goad Skywalker once more. Obi-Wan assumes the opening form position of Form 4 Ataru, the form of Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn, a form that Dooku knows extremely well. This had been the same lightsaber form Kenobi used against him on Geonosis. Anakin opens into a High Guard Form 5 Shien, again, the same form that he utilized before on the desert world. They had all been dismantled by Dooku, who was able to exploit the fact with Anakin that Shien was not particularly suited for saber-to-saber combat. It was especially weak against Makashi, which was suited for this exact task. Within his mind, Tyranus knew that the plan was simple: isolate Skywalker, slaughter Obi-Wan. He was so confident about his plan and it all taking place that he was almost bored of having to execute it, believing that his victory was assured. The fight begins with Dooku effortlessly fending both of the Jedi off as they both attempt to attack him at the same time. They are uncoordinated, sloppy, very easily dealt with. At one point, Dooku sends Anakin to the floor, throwing chairs from the situation table at him. He then sends him crashing through a wall by throwing the table itself, all the while holding off Kenobi with one hand. The Sith Lord is already in the process of separating the Jedi, of killing Obi-Wan, but they're making it easy for him now, so much so that he finds the whole process to be less of a duel and more of a comedy. The novel tells us this: they were certainly energetic enough, leaping and whirling, raining blows at random, cutting chairs to pieces, and using the Force to hurl them in every conceivable direction, all while Dooku continued, all in his gracious, methodical way, to outmaneuver them so thoroughly, it was all he could do to keep from laughing out loud. It was a simple matter of countering their tactics, which were depressingly straightforward. Anakin was the swift one, whooshing here and there in a spastic hawk-bat way, attempting a Jedi variant of the Neek in the middle, so that they could come at him from both sides, while Obi-Wan came in a measured way using Shicho cadence, deliberate and Lumberdroid-like, moving step by step, cutting off the angles, clumsy, but relentlessly dogged as he attempted to drive Dooku into the corner, whereas all Dooku needed to do was slip from one side to the other, occasionally flip overhead here or there, fighting each of them in turn, rather than both of them at the same time. For Dooku, it was amusingly easy to keep the Jedi tripping and stumbling so that they would always be in each other's way. He played their styles against each other and positioned so that they used their own teamwork as an obstacle. It was all so simple that Dooku was frustrated, insulted that he would have to inevitably fake losing against Skywalker. In Dooku's mind, Tyranus mentions how elementary it was, how he could cut them down easily. But this is what the novel reads: only one death was in his plan, and this dumb show was becoming tiresome, not to mention tiring. The dark power that served him went only so far, and he was, after all, not a young man. Dooku then enters a saber lock with Kenobi, which brings them close, and he tells the Jedi Master that his moves are far too slow and that he must do better, repeating the same sentiment that he had for Obi-Wan on Geonosis. But for longtime viewers of the channel, we know exactly what's about to happen. This is the moment that Dooku has the rug pulled out from under him, the moment he realized that he had been completely played for a fool. We're going to read from the novel and let it speak for itself. Kenobi's response to this friendly word was to regard him with a twinkle of gentle amusement in his eye. "Very well then," the Jedi said, and shot straight upward over Dooku's head so fast that it seemed that he had vanished. And in the space where Kenobi's chest had been, there was now only the blue lighting of Skywalker's blade driving straight for Dooku's heart. Only a desperate whirl to one side made what would have been a smoking hole in his chest into just a line of scorch through his armor-weave cloak. Dooku thought, what? He threw himself spinning up and away from the two Jedi to land on the situation table, disengaging for a moment to recover his composure. That had been entirely too close, but by the time his boots touched down, Kenobi was there to meet him, his blade now weaving through a defensive velocity so bewilderingly fast that Dooku dared not even attempt to strike. He threw a feint towards Kenobi's face, then he dropped and spun in a reverse ankle sweep, but not only did Kenobi easily overleap the attack, Dooku nearly lost his foot to a slash from Skywalker. Skywalker, who had again come out of nowhere, and now carved through the table so that it collapsed under Dooku's weight, and dumped the Sith Lord unceremoniously to the floor. This was not in the plan. Skywalker slammed his following strike down so hard that the shock of deflecting it buckled Dooku's elbows. Dooku threw himself into a back roll that brought him to his feet, and Kenobi's blade was there to meet his neck. Only a desperate whirling slash block coupled with a wheel kick caught Kenobi on the thigh, brought him enough time to leap away. But when Dooku touched down, Skywalker was already there. The first overhand chop of Skywalker's blade slid off of Dooku's instinctive guard. The second bent Dooku's wrist. The third flash of blue forced Dooku's scarlet blade so far into the inside that his own saber scorched his shoulder, and Dooku was forced to give ground. Dooku felt himself blanch. Where had all of this come from? Skywalker came on, mechanically, inexorable, impossibly powerful, a destroyer droid with a lightsaber, Each step a blow, each blow a step. Dooku backed away as fast as he dared. Skywalker stayed right on top of him. Dooku's breath went short and hard. He no longer attempted to block Skywalker's strikes, but only to guide them slanting away. He could not meet Skywalker's strength to strength. Not only did the boy wield tremendous reserves of force energy, but his sheer physical power was astonishing. And only then did Dooku understand that he had been suckered. Skywalker's Shien-ready stance had been a ruse, as had his Ataru gymnastics. The boy was a Gemso stylist, and as fine of one as Dooku had ever seen. His own elegant Makashi simply did not generate the kinetic power to meet Gemso head to head, especially not while also defending against a second attacker. It was time to alter his own tactics. He dropped low and spun into another reverse ankle sweep. The weakness of Gemso was its true lack of mobility. That slapped Skywalker's boot sharply enough to throw the young Jedi off balance, giving Dooku the opportunity to leap away. Only now, he found himself again facing the wheel of blue lighting that was Kenobi's lightsaber. Dooku decided that the comedy had now ended. Now it was time to kill. Kenobi's master had been Qui-Gon Jinn, Dooku's own Padawan. Dooku had fenced Qui-Gon Jinn thousands of times, and he knew every weakness of the Ataru form. With its ridiculous acrobatics, Dooku drove a series of flashing thrusts towards Kenobi's legs to draw the Jedi Master into a flipping overhead maneuver so that Dooku could burn through his spine from his kidneys to his shoulder blades. And this image, this plan, it was so clear in Dooku's mind that he almost failed to notice that Kenobi met every one of his thrusts without so much as moving his feet, staying perfectly centered, perfectly balanced, blade never moving more than a millimeter more than was necessary, deflecting without effort, riposting with flickering strikes, and stabs swifter than the tongue of a Garoldian ghost viper. And when Dooku felt Skywalker regain his feet and stride once more towards his back, he finally registered the source of that blinding defensive velocity, registering what Kenobi had done only a moment ago, and then, belatedly, did he understand that Kenobi's Ataru and Shi-Cho had been ploys as well. Kenobi had become a master of Surisu. Dooku found himself having a sudden, unexpected, overpowering, and entirely distressing bad feeling about all of this. In the novel, the winds of change hit the invisible hand harder than a Republic turbo laser ever could. The tables turned so sharply that it gave Dooku whiplash. The beginning of the fight had indeed been a comedy, but the object of ridicule had actually been Dooku this whole time, not the Jedi. They faked their forms, and they made themselves look clumsy, inept, hiding the fact that they had become the most dangerous duelists in the galaxy during the 3 years of the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan's defensive power was so refined and so sharp that even Dooku's Makashi could not penetrate it. And Anakin's offensive might had become so potent that Dooku was having a hard time keeping himself steady. Just moments ago, he had been complaining about how Anakin was a stupid boy that didn't deserve to be even called a Jedi. He couldn't understand Sidious's interest in him, only noting that Skywalker had a lot of anger and a high midichlorian count. Beyond this though, Dooku despised and greatly underestimated Anakin at every single turn. But now, he's one of the single finest blade masters of the era. He had just labeled Anakin a master of Gemso, a master as fine as he has ever seen. And his power is such that it was bending his wrist back, causing him to injure himself with his own lightsaber. The plan was to isolate Anakin and to kill Obi-Wan. Dooku had fixated on this plan so confidently and so arrogantly that he thought it was a simple matter. He toyed with the Jedi to stoke his own ego, to cover up the fact that he was about to fake losing. But now he wasn't faking anymore. Dooku found himself actually fighting for his life. In the face of Obi-Wan's impenetrable defenses and Skywalker's unrelenting attacks, the plan was not possible. Tyranus is in actual real danger here, and recognizes that the men that he had moments ago considered clowns are about to kill him. Finally, he draws heavily upon the dark side and unleashes a wave of energy to smash through Obi-Wan's defenses, to hurl him across the room. But he didn't have time to enjoy it, as Anakin was all over him like an animal. This is what the novel reads. The shining blue lightsaber whirled and spat, and every overhand chop crashed against Dooku's defense with the unstoppable power of a meteor strike. The Sith Lord had to spend lavishly on his force reserves merely to meet these attacks without being cut in half. And Skywalker was still getting stronger. Each parry cost Dooku more power than he'd used to throw Kenobi across the room. Each block aged him a decade. He decided that he best revise his strategy once again. He no longer even attempted to strike back. Force exhaustion began to close down his perceptions, drawing his consciousness back down to the physical form, trapping him within his own skull, his own mind, all until he could barely feel the contours of the room around him. He dimly sensed stairs at his back, stairs that led to the entrance balcony. He quickly retreated up them, using the higher ground for leverage, but Skywalker just kept coming, tirelessly, ferocious. That blue blade was everywhere, flashing, whirling faster and faster until Dooku saw the room through an electric haze. And now Kenobi was back in the picture. In this moment, Dooku was prematurely experiencing what Obi-Wan would later have to deal with on Mustafar, Anakin's juggernaut-like gem So. Once he gains momentum, Anakin begins to absolutely bulldoze his enemy with powerful strikes. But what's crazy about Anakin is instead of wearing him down, he gets faster, stronger, more aggressive. The longer the Anakin fights, the more power he ramps up rather than cooling down. And it was so bad that Dooku's perceptions were closing down around him. He was forced to anchor himself in the fight against Anakin just to stay alive. He wasn't able to use his senses to his advantage as efficiently, and with Obi-Wan back on his feet, Dooku orders his battle droids to slow him down. Finally, we get to the moment when Tyrannus is able to gain footing again. He folds Anakin in half with his strongest kick possible, and sends Kenobi reeling with a force push. This is where he drops the alloy and the permacrete walkway on top of Obi-Wan, hoping that this would finally keep him down. What the novel doesn't say though, is what we in the archives have often theorized, is that this was Dooku actually having mercy on Obi-Wan. He had always thought that the Jedi Master was a much better candidate for the Sith than Anakin was, and he was baffled at the idea of killing Obi-Wan and letting all of his talents go to waste. Not to mention, this was the last vestige of Qui-Gon Jinn, the only last real piece of Qui-Gon Jinn in the galaxy as far as Dooku knows, and so once he lifted Obi-Wan in the air, he very well could have just run him through with the lightsaber. Instead though, he had mercy, and disabled him rather than killing him. However, the action heavily displeased Sidious, who ordered Dooku to end his life there. But Dooku had absolutely no time to think about this, or to even savor the moment of defeating Kenobi. As soon as Dooku turned around, his entire vision was obstructed by a boot, one coming directly for his face at something resembling terminal velocity. He'd flip over the railing only just barely to land on his feet, as he attempted to put back his front of superiority, but that had all failed. He knew it was no longer true. Anakin had grown far beyond Dooku had thought possible. Anakin jumps down to join him on the floor, and this is what the novel tells us happens next. Skywalker leapt from the balcony. Even as the boy hurled downward, Dooku felt a new twist in the currents of the Force between them, and he finally understood. He understood how Skywalker was getting stronger, why he no longer spoke, how he had become a machine of battle. He understood why Sidious had been so interested in the boy for so long. Skywalker was a natural. There was a thermonuclear furnace where his heart should be, and it was burning through the firewalls of all of his Jedi training. He held the Force in the clench of a white-hot fist. He was half Sith already, and he didn't even know it. The boy had the gift of fury, and even now he was holding himself back. Even now, as he landed at Dooku's flank and rained blows upon the Sith Lord's defenses, even as he drove Dooku backwards step after step. Dooku could feel how Skywalker kept his fury banked behind walls of will, walls that were hardened by some uncontrollable dread Dooku surmised of himself, of what might happen if he should ever allow that furnace he used for a heart to go supercritical. The realization hit Dooku that Anakin's natural affinity towards the dark side had been the very reason that he was desired so desperately by Sidious. And now that Obi-Wan was gone, Tyrannus could finally focus on the plan that the two Sith had concocted. It was time now to bring Anakin to the dark side. And so Dooku begins goading him, speaking about how he had hate, anger, but he didn't use it. He prodded at him, stating that he was simply afraid of the dark side, calling him a liar that he was the hero with no fear. It's at this point that Palpatine speaks from the chair, telling Anakin to use his anger to kill the Sith. Dooku is astounded by this, wondering whose side Palpatine is actually on. And finally, Anakin understands. He knows that he is the only thing standing between death and the two men that he cares about the most, and he drives Dooku back even more. The Sith Lord's death was so assured, everything that happened before was a simple performance. The novel tells us that Dooku's years of training, political acumen, and even his power in the Force was nothing but a joke in the face of Skywalker's power. And finally, Anakin decides that he should end it by taking the arm that Dooku took from him, but doubled the repayment. He slips his guard, and with a smooth slice, off come the tools of Dooku's greatest pride, his hands. No longer did he hold his lightsaber, the very thing that gave him such recognition. Now, it was Anakin's hand, crossed over his throat like scissors. In the film, George Lucas originally wanted Dooku to beg for his life. This was actually in the script, but Sir Christopher Lee believed that it was unbecoming of the character, who would be so shocked at not only losing his hands, but at Palpatine's betrayal, that he would not utter a word. Stunned and in silence, he would not break his elegant demeanor, but more so beg for mercy simply by meeting Anakin's eyes with his own. But in the novel, Matthew Stover decided to go with George's vision, and he allowed Dooku to beg. His courage and refinement now a bitter memory, as the Count shrivels into a helpless victim. This was a cruel twist of irony. Dooku is reduced to the position that many of his own victims have been before his very blade. But now it's his turn. The only thing that makes Anakin hesitate is his years of Jedi training. But the words that Palpatine says next, the two simple words, unlocks him. Do it was not actually a command, it was permission. And in his last moments, Dooku realized that everything that he had been, all his accomplishments, all his power, were for naught. Dooku had been a tool, just as everything else had been to Palpatine. Treachery was the way of the Sith, and he'd been played for a fool by Sidious. He would be Anakin's first victim, but certainly not his last. And then, the Count, Darth Tyranus, was finally no more. This was the novelization of the Duel on the Invisible Hand. The fight was much longer and more intricately detailed in the book. The setup and the execution of a master plan by Obi-Wan and Anakin is also pulled off with a lot of drama, especially seeing it from the mind of Dooku. Showing the reactions of both combatants, it would be difficult to translate on film. Dooku's defeat is a lot more sudden on screen, a quick advantage that Anakin takes, but in the book, Dooku's decline was slower, more painful, and his death was something that was telegraphed as being inevitable. I would say that the biggest change between the novel and the film was not only the dialogue and the choreography, but also the final moments of Dooku's life. And this is where we want to put a vote in the comments. Which version do you personally prefer? Do you like Christopher Lee's suggestion that it was unbecoming of his elegance to beg for his life? Or do you think it would have been a satisfying end to see Dooku reduced from an arrogant Sith Lord to a sniveling, desperate old man? Thank you guys so much for joining us today in the archives, as we've been excited to explore all of the different facets of Revenge of the Sith, from book to screen. Not to mention, the novel of the Duel on the Invisible Hand is something that we reference quite a bit at the archives, and we believe a full breakdown and explanation has been long overdue. But as always, we hopefully will see you in the next one, my friends, and may the Force be with you.